Yo, what's going on, everybody? The Cool Geek here, and I'm at you with another video. Hopefully I'm not echoing like crazy. I just tested my mic and it wasn't echoing. If it is, I'm sorry. Um, I am doing a dimensional tiering video. Um, because in my latest versus battles, my latest 3 versus battles, aka all of them except for my first one, I have been throwing around universe, multiverse, and fourth dimensional a lot, 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, and it might get pretty confusing if you don't know how dimensional tiering works and what it actually means to be a dimensional tier higher than somebody or higher than someone in said dimensional tier. And this map might look familiar. I used it in my Goku vs. Flash and my Flash vs. Bill videos. And this is the map of the DC Multiverse, and it's a pretty accurate representation of how the multiverse, our multiverse, might actually work. And the DC representation and the Marvel representation are the ones I'll be focusing on today, and they're both pretty different. Although the DC multiverse and both the Marvel multiverse have shown they use the each other's multiversal systems, and we'll be taking a look at string theory first. That's what the DC multiverse is made up of mostly. We'll get into that later. And the Marvel multiverse is mostly a quantum multiverse. I'll get into what that means as well later. Now, what makes up a string theory multiverse is that, well, let's first get off into what is the actual smallest thing in the universe, right? If you said atoms, you'd be wrong. If you said protons, neutrons, and electrons, you would also be wrong. If you said quarks, you would also be wrong. Well, according to string theory anyway. According to string theory, the smallest thing anything can be would be a string, like this one, attached to this membrane. And that would make up a universe. Every string is a universe, right? And when the thing about string theory is that each universe, aka string like this one, is attached to a membrane like this one. And if say this is our universe, right? We're third dimensional. Or this bubble on the DC multiverse, I think it's this one, right? Say we're in the New 52 universe, right? This would be our universe, and this would be the higher dimension we're attached to. So that's the important thing to keep in mind. And that's important because according to string theory, the math that allows it to work properly needs the strings to vibrate through at least 9 different spatial dimensions. And that's kind of a problem since we only experience 3 of them: length, width, and depth. But time is also a dimension, but that has nothing to do with string theory. That's actually going to be part of the quantum timelines. So don't go all saying, you forgot to mention time. Time is a dimension. Yeah, I know, but it's not relevant to string theory. The strings have to vibrate through 9 different spatial dimensions. Spatial dimensions. Time is a temporal dimension, right? But that is important for dimensional tiering. So I'll get onto that later. Now, we're vibrating on these membranes, right? Our strings we're third dimensional, right? So we would be attached to a 4th dimensional brain, vibrating through, we would be third dimensional strings vibrating through 4th dimensional space on a 5th dimensional brain vibrating through 6th dimensional space, and so on and so forth, right? And the DC map does a really good job at illustrating this. The bubbles you see in here are each little universes, right? You'll be most likely, if you're a DC fan, to remember the New 52 universe, and I think Earth 1 and Earth 2, right? Well, the bubbles are all universes, right? And the space in between, this red all in here, that would actually be, let's move over to Dragon Ball real quick, would be something along the lines of the world of void. It's a realm of nothingness with no space or time, and then our little bubbles are just floating in here, you know? And then outside of that would be this little glowing thing, which encompasses all of time, because once you get off to the next section right here, the 5th dimension, time is no longer a thing. And when so once you get there to 5th dimension, you far surpass time by a lot. Okay, so time is absolutely crap to you. Now, and then there's the 6th dimension, 7th, 8th, 9th, all the way up to the 9th spatial dimension. Now, at least the 9th spatial dimension. Now that we've got the gist of that, now let's look at a little bit quantum multiverses right here. Now, instead of being separated by branes and vibrations, quantum universes are separated by timeline divergences. Say you're planning on asking out a girl, right? You're like, oh, today's the day. I'm gonna ask this hot chick out, right? Yeah. Alright, and then you ask if she wants to go out. Now, she will either say yes or she will say no. She can't say both. So this is where quantum mechanics says it's not a decision. Actually, the timeline splits. And there's one universe where she says, yeah, sure, why not, right? I want the D. And there's one where she says, no, I'm good. I don't like you. You know? Or, you know, you're a terrible person. I think I might hate you, right? And actually, there can be more universes, but this is the simplest way to put it. One where she says, yeah, sure, one where she says no. There could also be countless other universes where she says, yeah, only, and then one where she'll say no. And one where she'll say, yeah, sure, I always thought you were cuter. Yeah, sure, I just now, like, realized how cute you were, right? And then one where she'll say no, and that'll be the end of it. And one where she'll say, nah, you're uglier. One will say, no, your personality sucks. Your personality is garbage, right? And so it's one big, like, kind of a web. You'll start off going straight, and then you'll split, and then you'll go in one universe, and then you'll split again at another point. Basically, every time there's any sort of decision, especially if it's a 50-50 decision, the timeline of history splits, and it creates a new universe. And it's only separated by the laws of time. Now, that's basically the gist of the quantum timelines. Now let's jump back to the DC multiverse here, since there is a string theory universe right here, but this right here is the Speed Force, and I talked about that in both of my Flash videos. And in case you didn't know, the Speed Force would actually be the time dimension, which would be the 4th, not spatial dimension, but the 4th dimension in total. That's why when you go off from 4th dimension and 5th dimension, if you're 5th dimensional, you're not bound by time, but there are certain rules that you still have to abide by that are like that you don't have complete control over. Whereas if you're 4th dimensional, a lot of the 5th dimensional rules still bind you 100%, and the 4th dimensional rules don't apply to you mostly. And this is where things get a little bit tricky, because if you're 4th dimensional and you were not born 4th dimensional, like say Goku, you will still have multiple versions of yourself throughout time. But if you were born 4th dimensional, there's only one of you throughout time. And if you're 5th dimensional, but you weren't born 5th dimensional, there will be more than one of you. Like if you were born 3rd dimensional, there will be, and you just naturally increase. I mean, there's not natural increase. We'll get to that later, though. But you increase somehow to 5th dimensional. There will be multiple of you throughout different, universes. String universes, not quantum universes. I should make this clear. Every time I reference a universe from the 5th dimension standpoint, I'm talking about a string theory. When I'm talking about it from a 4th dimensional standpoint, I'm talking about quantum timelines. So if you're, say, 4th dimensional but you weren't born that way, there'll be multiples of you throughout time. If you're 5th dimensional but you weren't born 5th dimensional, there'll be multiple of you throughout the universes, right? And then 6th dimensional is kind of a fuse between you being above time and above universes all together, and you're just like a fusion between the two. Fusion, ha! Sorry, that was I just had to say that. But so yeah, once you get to the 5th dimension, which in DC that would be the Spear of the Gods, and the Spear of the Gods, I've come to the conclusion that it was 5th dimensional, because when you go from the 4th dimension to the 5th, you only get so much stronger, and Mr. Mxyzptlk was a 5th dimensional imp, and on the map of the DC multiverse, imps come from Dream, right? And so Mr. Mxyzptlk is an imp, and imps are from dreams. So you could say it's my headcanon, but I mean, where else would the imp come from other than Dream? And that's in the Spear of the Gods. So I mean, that's logically to be the 5th dimension if Mr. Mxyzptlk is from there. And also, there was the time that the rocket ship was stuck in between bleeds of reality, and I'm pretty sure that's this red right here that kind of stabs through stuff. So, Mr. Pixie, as I like to call him sometimes, couldn't get to here because it was slightly above the 5th dimension, which it looks like it's kind of holding everything together. Then that would make sense if it was not 6th dimensional, but just like high 5th, I guess you can say, or 5.5 if that's not a thing, but I guess you can say that. So he would be from the Spear of the Gods, and he's 5th dimensional, and he was born 5th dimensional. That's an important thing to note too. He would be here from the Spear of the Gods, so that's the 5th dimension. And it's really weird because it doesn't look like it has the 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th dimension, but it does have the 10th dimension, which would be the Monitor Sphere, which is where the Monitor race keeps watch over all of existence. And it's really weird because it's the 10th dimension, but the 9th spatial dimension, which allows string theory to work properly. But something to note is that the monitors were said to be nigh omnipotent, but they're from the 10th dimension, which it doesn't really make sense, but whatever. I'm gonna ignore that for now. Now that we've covered that, what exactly does being 4th dimensional, why does it mean you're stronger than 3rd dimensional, right? Well, here's a good thing to say, right? So you have a line, right? And it has length, but it has no width. And then you have a square that has length and width. And multiply length times width, you get area. So if you throw this line in a 2-dimensional realm with this square, it's so small and weak, it doesn't even exist. Because length times no width equals no area. Because it only has length, no width, which therefore means it has no area. Which means the square would be infinitely more real than this line. Even if the line had an infinite distance, right, the length was infinite, infinite multiplied by 0 width is still 0. So this infinite line would be nothing to this 2-dimensional square that would only be like, I don't know, a freaking centimeter area, right? Even if the area was only 1 square centimeter, it would be bigger and more real than this infinite 1-dimensional line. And then likewise, if you take this 2-dimensional square and throw it in the 3-dimensional world, it has length and width, and say it has infinite length and width, it won't even exist because it has no depth, because we're length, width, and depth. Length, width, and depth equals volume, and if you have volume, you have some sort of mass. But that 2D square has no volume or mass, right? And then you can keep going on and on, right? If you drop us in the 4th dimension, which would be time, we have length, width, and height, right? Length, width, depth, whatever you want to say. And then you multiply, and then also the 4th dimension would be time, right? So length, width, depth, and drop it in a dimension where you have to have time to exist, we wouldn't exist, right? We would just like die. And if you drop a 4th dimensional thing in the 5th dimension, length, width, height, time, and, you know, dimensional concept, I suppose, it wouldn't exist, and so on for the 6th and 7th dimension, right? So, if you are... So, and here's something that'll make you feel good about yourself. I'll get to that after I cover the Minger sponge, right? Say you have a cube, right? A third-dimensional cube, but you punch so many holes in it that it has infinite surface area, but it has 0 volume, right? And no mass, right? If you put little two-dimensional people in there, they would be very impressed that the object was infinite from their perspective. But if you ask us, it's not only less than infinite, but it doesn't exist at all, because it's just not there. So that's something important to note too. It would be infinite to them, but to us, it would be completely non-existent. And that's a good way to put it. So here's something to feel good about yourself, right? You know how third-dimensional being is infinitely greater than a two-dimensional being, and a two-dimensional being is infinitely greater than a one-dimensional being. Well, we're third-dimensional beings, so that means, therefore, that we'd be infinitely greater than a two-dimensional being, and 2 levels of infinity greater than a one-dimensional being. So if you ever feel bad about yourself, just think about that. You're infinitely greater than every being in the 2nd dimension, and 2 levels of infinity greater than any being in the 1st dimension. Something to keep in mind. Now let's move on to other things, because this isn't just a video about, you know, just random dimensions, right, and dimensional tiering. But we are going to branch off into things like macrocosm. What does that even mean? I brought it up in my Goku vs. Flash video, and I said it was 3 universes, and from the shape, I guess you'd be like, what are you talking about? It's just a sphere with this little smaller sphere orbiting it, right? Well, the thing about the macrocosm, even though it's not the best illustrated, it was stated by Akira Toriyama to have the living universe, heaven, hell, the demon realm, and this egg orbiting it is the Kaioshin realm, which orbits outside of the universe. So every time Goku instant transmission from the living universe to the Kaioshin realm, it's a much bigger feat than a lot of people may first believe at first glance, because, like I said, it's outside of the universe. Now, the living universe is, well, just what it sounds like. The living universe, right? 200 billion galaxies, possibly infinite, whatever you want to say the universe is, right? As a matter of fact, there's a multiverse theory that states that the universe just goes on forever, and by law of probability, there has to be another creature exactly like you in another solar system, just like on a planet just like Earth, and a solar system exactly like ours, and a galaxy just like the Milky Way. But that's not really a multiverse theory, if you ask me. It's just one really big universe, right? But so there's a universe, whatever you want to call it. If you want to say it's 200 billion galaxies, 400 billion, if it's infinite in size, who cares? That's not what we're getting at, right? And then there's the demon realm, which is stated to be the flip side of Earth. It's the flip side to the living universe, sorry. It's exactly the same in size. And then I believe it was heaven, which was supposed to be also the same size of the universe. And it might be the afterlife, but I'm pretty sure it's heaven that was supposed to be the size. Hell is smaller than heaven, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. But to lowball, I guess you can say that the living universe is the size of 1. The afterlife is another universe in size, and the demon realm is another universe in size, and the Kaioshin realm, it takes up a decent chunk of this, but I mean, so does the sun on the map, so I mean, but, so we're gonna say that it's 3 universes in size, plus, say, I don't know, a galaxy in size, right? And that wouldn't really interrupt this at all, even though it does have heaven and hell on the map, right? But, I suppose you can just say that heaven would be more like a pocket dimension, and that pocket dimension would be linked to the actual higher heaven, since, in DC it was established that heaven had an infinite, amount of universes in it, which was kind of weird. Not universes, but dimensions. pocket dimensions. We'll get to what that is later, right? So it's said to have an infinite amount of afterlives, right? That's what it is. It has an infinite amount of afterlives tailored for each individual in all of creation, right? So no matter where you are, if you die and go to heaven, you end up here. And if you die and go to hell, you end up here. So the heaven is a pocket dimension that's linked to this heaven. And hell here is linked to this hell. But this afterlife is linked to these two afterlives. So it doesn't really conflict with each other. And then each one of these on this map would be surrounded by this, right? And also, I just said pocket dimension. Pocket dimension, right? It's not another full-fledged universe that might be infinite in size. Most, I guess I should say, pocket dimensions would be like, say, Mephisto, right? He owns a dimension he calls hell. It's not the real hell, but he calls it that just to scare people, right? Now, it's separate from the main Marvel universe, whichever one the people who are fighting him are from, but it's not a higher dimension or even another universe like in the normal sense. It's a smaller universe that's smaller. It has a limited size. Like I said, some universes are infinite depending on what theory you want to go with, but if you say the universe is infinite, right, his pocket dimension might only be city level. Not his in specific, but a pocket dimension might be city level, right? And if you destroy a pocket dimension, that doesn't necessarily make you universal, right? Because some people try and claim that, and some people, especially that try and wink their characters, say, oh, this person blew up a pocket dimension. That makes them universal, and universes are infinite, so they have infinite power. Some really try and wink and say fourth dimensional or omnipotent or something like that. And keep in mind, from the examples I gave earlier, just because you're infinite doesn't make you omnipotent. Like this one-dimensional line is infinite, but compared to this 2D square, it doesn't even exist. So a pocket dimension could be anything from, I think I've seen one pocket dimension that was like the size of a really small room when I was watching this one anime. I forgot what it was called, but someone summoned a pocket dimension and it was like the size of a small room, maybe even a medium-sized closet, right? So pocket dimensions can be as small as like a really small closet or as big as a real universe, all depending on mostly, either if the size isn't directly stated, you just have to use lore and scaling to determine where that person should be at if they bust a dimension, right? Like the hyperbolic time chamber in Dragon Ball was stated to be infinite, so I mean, you could say that one's infinite, but the one in, say, the Kamui dimension from Naruto, it was not stated to have a size. But if you suck yourself into Kamui and you always appear at a different spot parallel to where you on Earth, you could make the argument for it being planetary, but you can also make the argument for it being, say, universal in size, because like I said, it was never stated, and there's no real feats. If someone were to go on the moon and use Kamui and it worked, there's a very good chance that the Kamui dimension would be, like, planetary plus, like planet and its moon, and Kaguya was going to destroy her dimension, and a lot of people say, oh, that makes her universal or infinite. Well, no, because the universe they were in had a star, a planet, and I think it had a moon or two, so I mean, that's not screaming infinite. And some of her dimensions didn't even have stars. Some of them just had, like, planets, right? And so each one of her dimensions is approximately a slightly different size. So that's something important to keep in mind, so you don't go out saying just because someone destroyed a pocket dimension, which technically is a small universe, but again, a small universe that has a limited size more often than not. So, that's important to keep in mind. Now, let's get on to the Omniverse, right? And let's first start off by connecting Marvel and DC. Remember how I said Marvel had a quantum timeline, right? It had this, and then DC had the string theory multiverse. Well, Marvel and DC have had their crossovers, and the Spider-Verse series actually explains that Marvel, and keep in mind this is canon, it also operates on a string multiverse, right? Because the Great Weaver spun the Web of Life, which is a third-dimensional construct because it holds all of the third-dimensional universes, but it's in fifth-dimensional space, and the Great Weaver is fifth-dimensional. So, and the Spider Avatars use the the Great Weaver lets the Spider Avatars use the Web of Life to transport between dimensions. I suppose I should have said spoiler alert because the Spider-Verse movie is coming out, but I do not know if it's going to include everything from the comics. Oftentimes they don't, especially considering having the Great Weaver being fifth dimensional would kind of be way too OP and just kind of no. But that is something I thought I should bring up. So it's factual that and when the Flash first went from the DC multiverse to the Marvel one, he did so by the way he always turns between universes, and that's vibrating and letting his strings sync with whatever universe he's trying to go to. So that's confirmation that they both operate on string theory. And also, I mean, the Speed Force is literally the time dimension. The Flash has done things like displace people throughout time, which wouldn't be possible if it did not operate on a quantum timeline. Now let's get on to bigger things like the Omniverse. The Omniverse is described as a collection of every single universe, dimension, etc. This includes the real world, right outside your window. Get out of your parents' basement and check it out. But it also includes every single universe, realm, etc. mentioned in any Marvel comic as well as any other company. It includes every single literary, television show, movie, urban legend, universe, realm, etc. Ronald Reagan to everybody from Ronald Reagan to Rocky Balboa, Romeo and Juliet, Luke Skywalker to Scooby and to Jay and Silent Bob, etc. Everything in the Omniverse. Everything is in the Omniverse. And there is only one Omniverse, which omni meaning all, right? The above classification system is devised at least in part by Mark Twain. However, it does seem to be missing the term Megaverse. Includes realms associated with particular timeline, comics, etc. But outside of the multiverse would include such realms as new comics and basically everything. You can read the rest for yourself. But that's from the official Marvel Handbook of the universe, the Marvel Universe Handbook. So the Omniverse would be everything, like literally everything ever created that will be created and that can be created, right? This whole bubble will be and there's actually something that may or may not be above this. But if we say this is the Omniverse, right, these little red things and these little lines above the monitor sphere are actually other timelines, and say that there are infinitely more, right? That would be the Omniverse. If there's infinite dimensions, right, that would be the Omniverse. And outside of the Omniverse would be someone who's outerversal. And I'll get to what that means later. And Mephisto would not count. Now, I've looked up the meaning of hyperversal, and I got, as you can see, two sort of answers. This one was from Xenoverse, and the hyperverse in Xenoverse, no pun intended, was, you could say the 3D universe, right? And then the fourth dimensional universe. Well, the fifth, and then the 4D multiverse, right? And the 4D multiverse would be in the fifth dimensional space, would be the hyperverse. So according to Xenoverse, being hyperversal would just be infinite, that would be fifth dimensional. So yeah, in Xenoverse, if you're hyperversal, that's just another way of saying you're fifth dimensional. Now, according to this, I got on what was it called? Comic Theory or something. But anyway, this person said outerversal. Well, we'll get to outerversal, but let's go down a bit. Right here, it says a hyperversal character is infinite dimensional, and the next out will be outerversal in the power. So if you're infinite dimensional, you're hyperversal, and if you're outerversal, you're beyond the concept of dimensions altogether. So you would be above infinite dimensional, right? So yeah, that's important to keep in mind. So if you're universal, that's fine. If you're multiversal, that's great, but you're nothing to a hyperversal being, and if you're a hyperversal being, you're nothing to an outerversal being. So essentially, being hyperversal would be like limited infinite dimensional. Being outerversal would be infinite dimensional, or you can just say nigh omnipotent. And then if you would be anything above outerversal, you're omnipotent. And if you fight someone, it's GG. It's not even a fight. You just blink them away, like no diff. You can just no diff anybody that's not omnipotent too. If you're omnipotent and you fight another omnipotent person, it wouldn't even be a fight. You would just stalemate instantly. Like there would be no fight. Fighting is not a thing if you're omnipotent. You just freaking look at your opponent, and if you're both omnipotent, you know, just nothing happens. It'll just be a stalemate. Kind of like if you play chess, and then if your kings are trying to fight each other, usually it doesn't work usually. But that's something I guess to think about. If you're above outerversal, which would be infinite dimensional, you're omnipotent. Outerversal equals nigh omnipotent, basically. So that's why I was kind of confused when the monitors were from the 10th dimension or the 9th spatial dimension, and they're supposed to be nigh omnipotent, which they technically should be outerversal, but whatever. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Now let's dive more into the where would the pocket dimensions be? And that's not really something that's explained in any of the multiverse theories I've found, but I guess you can just say that if you try and go to a different universe, but you fail, you might be able to enter a pocket universe, or through some sort of magic. And also, I guess now would be a good time to say the difference between magic and science. Let me ask you a question right now. Put in the comment section, what do you think the difference between magic and science is? Well, let's see if you got it right, because there is no difference, right? Magic and science both can accomplish the same thing, although in different ways. See, science, it's just easier to explain. Magic you can't really explain, but if you were to be able to explain magic, okay, so let me give you an example. If you were to show a caveman something scientific, right? Let's say you gave them a smartphone. They would assume it would be magic. Or heck, even people from medieval times. If you were to give them a freaking iPhone, right? They would be like, it's bewitched or something, and try and hang you, right? But if you were to give a modern person that's into science, if you would give a modern person magic, they would assume it's science. Like if you were to give them something that did the same exact thing as an iPhone, but it was magic instead of science, they would just assume it was the next iPhone that would be about to come out, right? Right. So magic and science, basically same thing, just different ways of accomplishing the same goal. And you could even make the argument for them both being the exact same thing, right? Let me see. There were a few more things I wanted to go over, but I can't remember what they were. So if you're infinite whatever dimensional, if someone's a higher dimension than you, they're infinitely greater. Just like we are infinitely greater than two-dimensional beings, and two-dimensional beings are infinitely greater than one-dimensional beings. So that makes us, in turn, through scaling, 2 levels of infinity greater than one-dimensional beings. So we'd like blow on them and they'd die. Not even joking. And actually, if you tried to go to like the first dimension, it would probably break. Like you'd break the freaking universe you tried to go to, collapse an entire one-dimensional multiverse. Like, not even joking. So yeah, and the DC multiverse, there's multiple multiverses throughout time, and there's multiple multiverses throughout the 5th dimension, or 4th string dimension, I guess you'd call it. So there's multiple multiverses throughout the higher dimensions, and each higher dimension holds the lower dimensions, and each lower dimension has infinite amount of that many multiverses. So just like the 4th dimension has infinite 3D universes, or like infinite, each multiverse includes an infinite amount of universes, more often than not. Every quantum one does anyway. And then you say that the 4th dimension holds all of the infinite multiverses, and the 5th dimension holds infinite 4th dimensional multiverses, which each universe has an infinite amount of 3D multiverses, and it just keeps stacking on top of each other. And each, like the 6th dimension, each 5th dimensional universe, each has their own infinite amount of 4th dimensional, which has infinite amount of 3-dimensional, which has an infinite amount of 2-dimensional, which has an infinite amount of 1-dimensional, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. So when I say being a higher dimension is infinitely greater than an infinite lower dimension, that's no exaggeration. Because to be able to bust a 4D universe, you'd be also busting like freaking multiple, like infinite amount of infinite multiverses. So like I said, being a higher dimension than somebody is no joke at all. So there's 9 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension, at least 9 spatial dimensions and 1 temporal dimension, and that means there's at least 10 dimensions in total. So yeah. I'm gonna keep, now that's pretty much the video, guys. I'm going to try to get the Kenpachi versus Zoro out as soon as possible. Like I said in my last video, it'll probably take a while, but I'm gonna try and get the feats as fast as possible. I'll probably have Roblox Steve versus Goku out next week, but just enjoy the filler meantime. Filler, that's funny. Yeah. If you have macrocosm, and you can destroy the universe without destroying the macrocosm. That's something I think that's important to point out as well. Because just because you destroy a universe doesn't mean you destroy the macrocosm. Like Super Boo from Dragon Ball Z was about to destroy the universe by crushing it with other dimensions. But the Kaioshin were about to be just fine. And everything in heaven and hell would be just fine. Just the living universe was going to be crushed. That's something to keep in mind too. And to be able to survive in the world of Void does make you 4th dimensional. That's something also important to keep in mind. And let's see. That'll be all, folks. So keep on the lookout for my next videos. I really enjoyed doing this video. I thought it was pretty fun. I kind of love to run my mouth about string theory and other multiverse theories. But actually, I just kind of love to run my mouth, period. But that's beyond the point. So, dang, these awkward freaking outros. Okay, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and have a nice day. Also, I almost forgot. My Amazon link, I'm having troubles with it. I think it has to do with my PayPal. Um, I'll have to, fix that before I'll actually make any commissions off of the affiliate link. But you can also always buy my merch. If you want something that I don't have, just let me know in the comments or in my Discord, link in the description, and I'll try and make it for you if I can, and if I can't, I'll just say, hey, I'm sorry I can't make it. And then just give me some more ideas, because whatever you want me to make, I'll make it, and you can order it, and that'll be great. It'll help a lot. Um, but, and also I'm looking to do collabs, if anyone wants to do a collab, if you have a channel, or even if you don't, if you just want to come on and help me with the versus battle, and if you're unbiased, or even if you're slightly biased towards the character you're representing, that's fine, just don't be like, oh my gosh, this character's infinite just because it's my favorite character. I don't. Your character sucks. Yeah. But no, none of that. But yeah, if you're slightly biased, that's fine. If we can actually have a debate on mic, like we can both give feats for our characters and then say which one we think will win. I think that'll be good. So. Yeah, also, I do subscriber appearances if you want to play me in a game of Final Stand on Roblox, Dragon Ball Final Stand, or Rogul or something, whatever you want to play. If you have some random game you want me to cover, that's fine. I'll show you in a subscriber appearance. If you don't want to be an appearance, but you have something you want me to cover, I'm down. I'm always down. So yeah, anything you want me to do, just let me know in a comment. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. And have a nice day. Please have a nice day. The Cool Geek out. Bye.
Good job.